Three young women triplets stormed into the lakeside wedding on Lake Michigan, shattering the joyful moment of a Chicago millionaire like an explosion in midair. Seconds later, they dropped the DNA bomb, irrefutable proof that the groom not only lived a secret double life, but also had three grown daughters he had never acknowledged. The entire room fell silent, wine glasses shattered on the floor, and the dream wedding turned into a public nightmare. But wait, before I tell you the whole shocking truth, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Make sure to subscribe because what you're about to see is even more explosive. Lake Michigan shimmered like a vast mirror, reflecting a sunset that painted the sky in gold. Inside, the ballroom glowed with the sparkle of crystal chandeliers and the gleam of fine champagne glasses. This was not just a wedding, it was Chicago high society's grand event, a gathering of business magnates, politicians, artists, and celebrities, all here to witness Daniel Carter, the famed self-made millionaire, enter a new marriage with Rachel Myers, a familiar face in the media world. The atmosphere was dignified, refined, flawless in every detail. From the rose-petaled aisle leading to the altar to the string quartet playing gentle melodies, everything seemed orchestrated to honor a dreamlike love. Rachel, in her pristine white gown, walked slowly forward, her eyes alight with happiness. Daniel stood waiting, the confident smile of a man who had tasted both failure and triumph, a man who now seemed to hold it all: wealth, fame, and love. But at the very moment the minister prepared to speak, the grand doors at the back of the hall suddenly swung open. Three figures appeared at once. They were young women, dressed in striking emerald green gowns that stood out against the sea of elegant attire. They looked eerily alike, each feature mirrored as though reflected in glass. The entire room turned, whispers rippling like waves. Curious, startled, even annoyed gazes converged on these uninvited guests. Their footsteps echoed across the marble floor, steady and resolute. The air grew heavy. Conversations died away, leaving only the music stumbling off tempo, as if the musicians themselves faltered at the sight. From the altar, Daniel froze. His eyes swept over the three identical faces, and for a fleeting moment, he saw the ghost of a woman who had vanished from his life more than 20 years ago. When the three stopped, silence engulfed the hall. They stood there, unyielding like witnesses to a truth buried too long. In the hand of the one in front was a white envelope, its folds precise, like a velvet-sheathed dagger. No one knew what it contained, but instinct whispered it held power far greater than any blessing spoken that day. Tension broke as the envelope was opened and a sheet of paper lifted high. Bold letters gleamed under the lights. DNA test results. A wave of murmurs swept through the hall, each sound like glass shattering, each glance frozen in disbelief. Everything happened too quickly, too suddenly. In that instant, the lavish lakeside wedding ceased to be a symbol of joy and transformed into the scene of a silent explosion. A DNA bomb had just been dropped, shattering the illusion of perfection in a single heartbeat. And at the storm's center, Daniel Carter, the millionaire who had once survived bankruptcy, rebuilt his empire from nothing, now stood powerless, pinned down by a past demanding its due. All right then, my dear audience, if you're still watching and finding this story gripping, drop a comment with the number 1, or write, "I'm still here to keep listening." The ballroom still echoed with stunned whispers as Daniel stepped down from the altar. Every eye followed him, some curious, others heavy with judgment. Rachel, the new bride, stood frozen at the dais, her fingers gripping the bouquet so tightly that the rose petals began to crush. The woman who had just stepped into the glittering marriage of her life now found herself shoved aside, helplessly watching her groom walk away with three strangers. The three figures in emerald green followed silently, like shadows summoned by the past. The long red-carpeted corridor leading to Daniel's private study became a walk of judgment. Each step he took resounded in silence, beating in rhythm with his racing heart. Outside, the wedding that should have rung with laughter now lingered only in fractured notes, broken music straining to cover up the storm that had just erupted. The study doors closed, sealing them off from hundreds of stairs. The room was dimly lit by antique lamps, a stark contrast to the glittering chaos outside. Here, everything was smaller, more intimate, yet unbearably heavy. No stage, no masks of society, only four people facing each other in suffocating air. Daniel stood still for a long moment, his eyes scanning the three faces so eerily alike, features so familiar they hurt. In an instant, he no longer saw strangers, but fragments of the woman who had once been his entire youth, Eleanor. The hair, the eyes, the half-hidden smile at the corner of their lips, all of it like a ghost pulled back from the past, so vivid he could not deny it. The white envelope lay on the dark wooden desk, the paper inside still there, cold and merciless. The number stamped itself into his mind. More than 99%. A truth beyond denial. Daniel felt his chest tighten, not from the data, but from the years lost. 25 years. All that time, 3 lives had grown up beyond his reach, silently becoming adults without him ever knowing. A breeze stirred the curtains, sharpening the tension in the room. Daniel pressed a trembling hand to his temple. He had faced financial collapse, bankruptcy, markets crashing, and millions evaporating overnight, but never had he felt so utterly exposed, so powerless, as he did now. The 3 young women stood in silence. They didn't need to speak. Their very presence was an accusation, proof of the years Eleanor had carried alone. In their eyes, Daniel saw both pride and wounds. And in that silence, another truth emerged. Eleanor had never told him. She had left carrying the secret, leaving him emptiness and leaving them the inheritance of absence. Time dragged on. At last, Daniel let out a long, heavy breath, as though 2 decades of weight had collapsed onto his shoulders at once. The room sat in stillness before a new storm. Whatever words were spoken first would reshape all their lives. And while outside, the wedding limped on, patched together under a buzz of whispers. Inside this hidden room, a family was being reborn in pain, in confusion, and in an undeniable truth. And now, my dear audience, pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button before we continue with the heart of this story. But only if you truly resonate with what I'm sharing here. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world joining us together. Inside the closed room, the silence stretched so long that the ticking of the wall clock struck like hammer blows. Daniel leaned back against the desk, his hand gripping the wooden edge until his knuckles turned white. He looked at the 3 young women, 3 versions of the same secret, and felt past and present coil together, tightening around his throat. A wave of memory crept in. He remembered Eleanor, remembered her focused posture over research papers, remembered the brightness in her eyes whenever she solved a difficult equation. He also remembered the way she left silent, resolute, offering no explanation. Back then, he thought it was simply a career choice. Now, the truth lay bare. She had left with a living secret, carrying away a part of his life he had never known existed. One of the 3 women placed the DNA envelope back on the desk, directly in front of him. That sheet of paper was no longer a cold scientific proof, it had become an indictment. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest crushed beneath invisible stone. He had nowhere left to hide, no clever smile of a businessman to maneuver his way out. The 3 daughters' gazes were not the same. One steady, one hesitant, one laced with doubt. 3 strands of personality, 3 currents of emotion, all converging on a single truth: the absence of a father. In that silence, Daniel realized he was not facing just one truth, but 3 childhoods, 3 lives grown in the emptiness he had left behind. He spoke at last, his voice hoarse, as though he hadn't uttered words in years. The sentences rolled out heavy, not in denial, but in stunned admission, in helplessness before a truth too stark to ignore. For the first time in decades, Daniel was no longer the proud millionaire of the business world. He was just a man, brought to his knees by 3 pairs of painfully familiar eyes. Then he asked, not with words, but with his gaze, why this day? Why not any other moment? The 3 faces turned to each other, as if bound by a silent thread. The answer was clear without a word, because time had run out. The woman who had protected them, who had guarded this secret, was gone forever. They had not come to demand or to destroy, but to fulfill her final wish. The tears Daniel had fought to hold back finally glimmered at the corners of his eyes. In that moment, he was no longer the centerpiece of a lavish wedding. He was simply a man, facing 3 grown children he had never cradled, never sung to sleep, never seen take their first steps. 25 years had passed, and now the truth shattered every illusion of a complete life. Outside, the ballroom buzzed on, but in this room, a new family had just been born, not through blood alone, but through an undeniable truth. And in that very silence, Daniel knew that everything to come would decide not only his happiness, but also the fragile threads just knotted back together after 2 decades of loss. The study felt like an iron box packed with gunpowder. Daniel sat in silence, his back bowed as if 25 years of weight had just collapsed onto his shoulders. The 3 women stood a few paces away, the gap between them, an invisible front line where past and present had not yet found common ground. Suddenly, there was a rapid knock at the door, not waiting for an answer. The door flew open and Rachel appeared. Her pristine wedding dress brushed the carpet, but the elegance was gone. Her perfectly made-up face was tense, her deep red lips pressed tight. In her eyes there was not only anger but fear. Fear of losing her husband, losing her standing, losing the dream she had woven before hundreds of powerful guests out there. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The sisters straightened, defensive by instinct. Rachel did not look at them first, her gaze fixed accusingly on Daniel. He avoided that stare, fingers still gripping the DNA paper. The silence lasted only a few seconds but felt like a lifetime. Rachel finally glanced at the 3 women, and that instant felt like a blade slicing through the air. She registered their chilling likeness at once. Every line of their faces reflected a piece of the man who was now her husband. A scornful smile flickered across her mouth. "So it's true," she said, not loudly but with cold clarity. "The ones who wrecked my wedding didn't just bring a stunt, they brought the truth." Daniel flinched. He wanted to speak, to soothe. But before words could form, Rachel stepped forward. "What are you going to do next, Daniel? Leave me out there among the guests, and stay here with 3 girls who claim to be your daughters." The word claim cut sharp. One of the 3 quivered, but the one at the front, Mia, kept her gaze steady. She needed no defense. The paper on the desk said enough. Daniel raised his hand in a pleading gesture for silence, but his hesitation only thickened the tension. He felt trapped between 2 worlds, the newlywed wife on one side, and 3 lives of his blood he had never raised on the other. Both sides looked to him, waiting for an answer. Outside, the music still played, but it was no longer wedding music. It sounded warped, distant, as if the world beyond was a false stage, and the real drama was unfolding here. Rachel turned, her eyes blazing with fury. "Do you know what people are saying out there? The press, the cameras, the mouths eager to tear everything apart. In one night, your career, your reputation, everything you built could collapse. And I'll be the joke on tomorrow's covers." She paused, breathing as if anger made her tremble. Then she spoke words Daniel knew would haunt him. "If you choose them, you lose me. You lose the life you promised me. Make your choice." The 3 women said nothing, but their eyes shifted. They hadn't come to destroy his marriage, yet their presence had become a blade splitting the lavish wedding in 2. Daniel looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, lacking the steadiness of the businessman who had once stood unshaken in brutal markets. He looked at Rachel, then at the 3 women. His heart felt torn in 2. In that moment he understood. Any choice would leave wounds that might never heal. No one spoke. Only the clock ticked, a reminder that time passed even as their world had been overturned. At last Daniel spoke, his voice hoarse but clear. "We will talk, privately. Not here, not today." Rachel narrowed her eyes, a cold smile curving her lips. "Talk later? Out there, the whole city already knows. There is no later, Daniel. Either you walk back out with me as if nothing happened, or it all ends tonight." Those words fell like a sentence being handed down. The 3 women looked at one another, a strange feeling rising inside them. They had never imagined that their truth would turn into such a dangerous weapon in someone else's hands. Daniel sat there, heavy as stone. He gave no answer, neither denial nor confirmation. He only gripped the DNA paper tighter, until the folds pressed deep into his skin. Outside, sudden applause erupted, signaling some performance brought in to cover the disruption. Inside, 4 people stood or sat in silence, like actors trapped in a scene with no lines. And so, on what should have been the happiest day of his life, Daniel Carter sat in a cramped room, caught between an enraged bride and 3 unfamiliar daughters, waiting for a decision that would shape his entire future. You're still here with me, aren't you, my dear audience? Take a moment to relax, maybe sip a glass of water, and then listen on as the story unfolds. Drop a 1 in the comments if you're finding this story gripping. And don't forget to hit subscribe. The reception carried on, but no one inside the hall paid attention to the music or the wine anymore. Guests huddled in small groups, whispering, their eyes darting toward the office door that had been shut tight. Hidden cameras tucked in purses, phones lifted discreetly. Every so often a flash went off, capturing the rare chaos of a high society wedding gone wrong. It took only one photo to escape that room for the story to spread across the city, and it happened faster than anyone expected. In one corner of the hall, a social media journalist invited only as someone's +1 hit, send on a blurry photo. 3 women in emerald dresses standing face to face with Daniel Carter at his own wedding. The caption was short but sharp. 3 women claimed to be millionaire Daniel Carter's secret daughters right at the wedding. Number wedding day scandal, number Carter twins +1. Within minutes, the picture was everywhere. Twitter, then Instagram, TikTok, and a flood of gossip sites. Guests' phones buzzed non-stop. Some couldn't resist reading tweets out loud. Half smirks, head shakes, and murmurs of glee rippled through the ballroom. On the hotel balcony where the sisters had slipped away for air, Emma scrolled and froze. Her own face stared back at her from a stranger's post. Cold eyes, tight lips, chandelier light casting her like an actress in a tragedy. Her throat tightened. They had lost control of the story. Mia, steadying herself, kept her gaze fixed on Lake Michigan, where the city lights shimmered on the water. We chose this, she thought. Their mother had wanted the truth out. Now it wasn't a secret anymore, but the cost had come too fast, too heavy. Inside the office, Daniel had just finished a tense exchange with Rachel when his phone buzzed non-stop. His assistant's voice was urgent. It's on Business Insider, TMZ, even the New York Times online. Wall Street's already talking about the scandal. His face drained of color. 25 years of carefully crafted public image, and in a single night, all of it crumbled. Rachel stood nearby, her expression frozen, every trace of emotion locked away. She knew this game well. When public opinion takes over, only image survives. And hers, the brand new wife framed against 3 secret daughters, had cracked the moment the doors opened. The sisters hadn't expected their arrival to explode into a media frenzy. Lily's hands shook as she scrolled through endless comments, some supportive, many mocking, others accusing them of being gold diggers after fortune. A new hashtag surged to the top, number Carter daughters. Emma slammed her phone onto the table, fury burning in her eyes. They don't know us. They don't know Mom, and now they call us gold diggers. Daniel heard, but no words came. He wanted to defend them, yet he too was the target of public attack. The media didn't care about truth. What they wanted was spectacle. And tonight, 3 young women plus 1 DNA test had given them the perfect script. Outside, the noise swelled. Reporters forced their way past security, cameras raised toward the sealed door. What was meant to be a display of power and prestige had turned into a battlefield of images. In that moment, Daniel knew he had no choice left. Remain silent and let the media shape the story, or step out, face the world, and speak the truth in his own voice. The room went still. 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him, waiting. Outside, the roar of the crowd beat against the walls like waves on stone. Daniel drew a deep breath, his hand trembling as he let the DNA paper fall onto the desk. Then he rose. And as he turned toward the door, each heavy step carried the weight of inevitability. The private moment was over. The truth would now have to walk into the light. There was no way back. The noise outside the door roared like crashing waves, growing more violent by the second. Daniel stood frozen, his hands still marked red from clutching the DNA paper too tightly. He understood clearly. Silence now meant nothing. The media already had their story, the public, their verdict. If he didn't speak, they would write the rest for him. The door opened. White flashes from cameras exploded like lightning. Voices calling his name, questions hurled at him, all surging like a storm breaking loose. Daniel hesitated, his body stiff, pinned down by thousands of eyes. Behind him, the 3 young women stood motionless, yet their very presence was the fire feeding that crowd. He stepped forward, each footfall heavy. The hall no longer looked like a glamorous wedding. Half-eaten meals, drained glasses of wine, evening gowns now reduced to a warped backdrop for an unwanted press conference. Guests, reporters, even waitstaff raised their phones, every lens trained on him, waiting for a confession. Daniel drew a deep breath. He tried to speak, but his throat burned dry. A moment of silence passed, broken only by the clicking of cameras. Then his voice came, rough yet steady. "Tonight, a truth has come to me, one I never knew. I need time to understand, to listen, and to do what is right." The hall erupted a mix of shock and derision. Some guests nodded with sympathy, others turned away in scorn. To many, his half-answer was proof he lacked the courage to face it. Notifications and headlines spread instantly. "Carter does not deny. Real estate mogul accepts the truth." Rachel stood nearby, her face frozen like stone. She did not reach for her new husband's arm, offered no look of solidarity. In her mind, every word Daniel had spoken was a blade severing the fragile bond they had just formed. She knew now she was no longer the heroine of this story, only a shadow beside a scandal far greater. The three sisters, standing behind him, watched in silence. Mia felt both relief and ache. At least he hadn't denied them. Lily, in contrast, felt her heart sink. A half-answer was as good as rejection. Emma turned her face away, unable to bear the crowd's gaze. No sooner had Daniel finished speaking than a reporter shouted, "Will you change your will? Will you acknowledge these three girls as your legal heirs?" Chaos exploded. That question set the air ablaze. Guests buzzed, reporters shoved forward, lenses fixed sharply on the girls' faces. They had not been prepared for this moment. Suddenly the whole world linked them not with truth, but with fortune. Daniel staggered back a step, his face pale. He wanted to say that money had never been the point, but he knew that in the public's eyes, any words would be twisted. Silence was a crime. Speaking could turn him into a fool. Rachel leaned toward him, her whisper loud enough for the girls to hear. "I warned you. The public doesn't care about the truth, they want blood. And you've just handed them your whole family." Her words fell colder than any camera flash. The sisters froze. They had come to honor their mother's last wish, but within hours they had become the center of a public battlefield, where every word, every gesture would be judged. Daniel bowed his head, feeling trapped in a circle with no escape. He knew from this moment on, his life would never be the same. But what cut deepest was not his career crumbling. It was the look in his daughter's eyes, that blend of hope and heartbreak. Daughters he had never once been able to call by the most sacred word, children. On this night, when a wedding turned into a public tribunal, one decision hovered in the air. Would Daniel dare to acknowledge them openly, or would he cling to silence, trading away truth for the remnants of what he had left? 3 days later, Chicago had not quieted down. The press still swarmed. The hashtag number Carter children refused to leave the top trend. Every morning, blurred photos of the three girls still appeared on front pages, mixed with financial analyses predicting the Carter empire might collapse. Daniel barely slept. His office was drowning in the noise of scandal. Partners called in, worried that shares of subsidiary companies would nosedive. Close friends avoided him, or sent vague, half-hearted messages. He knew he could no longer stay silent. Every eye was waiting not behind closed doors, but under the spotlight. The opportunity or the trap arrived sooner than expected. A major real estate fundraising gala, the annual event Daniel could never skip, was already on the calendar. The guest list, investors, the mayor, the press. That night would be the public arena, where he would either salvage everything or lose it all. That evening, the city lights glittered across the Chicago River, reflecting off the luxury hotel hosting the gala. Inside, the air was thick with curiosity. Everyone forced polite smiles, but all waited for the moment Daniel Carter would take the stage. The Morgan sisters arrived first, dressed in elegant gowns Daniel had sent them. The crowd erupted instantly. Cameras swiveled, flashes burst like fireworks. To the public, there was no longer a question of, is it true? Their very presence, hand in hand as they entered, was silent confirmation. Daniel appeared last. He wore a black suit, his face gaunt, his eyes fierce. When he stepped onto the stage, the chatter stopped at once. A spotlight trapped him in its beam, as though delivering judgment. He looked out. Hundreds of faces, cameras broadcasting live, and in the front row Rachel, her face an icy mask. To his right stood the three girls, their eyes a mixture of fear and expectation. In that moment, Daniel knew there was no turning back. His voice rang out, slow and rough. I, Daniel Carter, have made a mistake. Not out of love, but out of silence. Tonight, I want to admit what I should have long ago. I have 3 daughters, and I will take responsibility, no matter what the public thinks. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, camera clicks thundered. Some guests applauded, others shook their heads, while the press blasted the breaking news live. In that instant, Daniel saw the shimmer in the 3 girls' eyes. Not happiness, not only pain but recognition. A wound, perhaps, could begin to heal. But before the applause could fade, a sharp voice cut through the noise. And what about your son, Daniel? Do you plan to abandon Noah to embrace these strangers? The question sliced the air. Cameras swung toward a figure rising Noah Carter, the only son Daniel had publicly raised, now facing his father with blazing eyes. The hall froze, then roared louder than before. Cameras flashed, live streams exploded. From that moment, the story was no longer just about a secret exposed. It had become an open family war. Daniel stood paralyzed, his heart heavy. The declaration he thought would set him free had instead unleashed a fiercer storm this time, not just from the public, but from his own blood. A new family battle had begun between past and present, between the Morgan sisters and Noah Carter, all under the relentless glare of America's spotlight. The night in Chicago closed with another storm not in the sky, but in the hearts of those whose fates had collided. Daniel Carter had stepped into the light, acknowledging 3 daughters he had never known. That choice shook public opinion, sent stocks plummeting, and rattled investors. But none of that was the deadliest blow. The true strike came from one person, Noah Carter. The young man rose in the hall, staring at his father not only with fury, but with betrayal. For in the moment Daniel opened his arms to 3 unfamiliar daughters, his own son felt cast aside. And sometimes, wounds from family cut sharper than any rumor outside. The Morgan sisters, once outsiders, were suddenly thrust onto the front lines of a family war. They hadn't come to compete, but now they were the center of an undercurrent. Rachel, the bride who never had her wedding, remained silent, watching. Victoria, the investors, the press, all of them were only the outer circle. The real battle was beginning inside the Carter family, where blood ties and power clashed without mercy. And Daniel? He knew only this. After 25 years of silence, he had lost the chance to choose the easy road. Now, every step forward was a gamble not just with his reputation, but with his own blood. And the question remained, could a father mend 2 halves of a family into one, or would he be the one to tear it all apart once more? The story had only just begun.